I first met her at the bookstore. Not some grand, romantic setting, just the corner shop that always smelled faintly of old paper and rain-damp coats. I worked there part-time, mostly stacking shelves and ringing up the occasional customer. She came in on Thursday evenings, always late, always alone, her hair still slightly wind-tossed like she had walked quickly from somewhere important. The first time I noticed her, she was leaning over a table display, fingertips brushing the cover of a novel she didn't end up buying. She looked composed, not stiff, just assured, like she belonged in every space she entered. I, on the other hand, nearly dropped the stack of books I was shelving when she glanced at me. Her eyes held mine for just a beat too long. Long enough that I forgot what I was supposed to be doing. That was months ago. Now, her visits feel almost routine. She doesn't say much when she comes in, but when she does, it's never just small talk. She'll ask me something like, "Do you think people read to remember themselves, or to forget?" As though she's testing if I can keep up. I try to answer, though my words never sound as sharp as hers. Still, she listens, actually listens. And when she tilts her head slightly, waiting for me to finish, I catch myself standing straighter, as if her attention alone makes me more present. Tonight was different, though. The store was nearly empty, the hum of the old ceiling fan louder than usual. She wandered in just before closing, carrying that same calm confidence that I've never been able to mirror. I was at the counter, pretending to reorganize receipts I didn't need to. "You're still here," she said lightly, setting a book down. "Someone has to lock up." I managed, though my throat felt too tight for such a simple line. She smiled, the kind of smile that isn't for everyone, the kind that makes you want to earn another. She tapped the book's spine with one finger. "A collection of poems. Browning. You read these?" she asked. I nodded. "Some. Mostly at night. When it's quiet." There was a pause then, a silence that stretched just long enough for me to feel it press against my ribs. She looked at me. Really looked. And it was like she could see past the cheap bookstore apron, past the part-time paycheck, straight into the mess I never say out loud. Her hand lingered on the book a moment longer. Then she pushed it gently back toward me. "Then you keep it. Words need to be read by someone who'll remember them." I didn't know what to say. The air between us felt heavier, like something unspoken had been set down right there on the counter between us. I should have thanked her and left it at that. But instead, all I could do was watch as she tucked her hair behind her ear, as if the small gesture hadn't just burned itself into my memory. Later, after she'd gone and the store was dark, I stood staring at the book she'd given me. I flipped it open and found her handwriting on the first page, just a single line, underlined once. "We're just friends. Nothing else." But her pause, the way her eyes lingered, the way my chest refused to let the words settle, that was something I couldn't shake. I closed the book slowly, whispering the only truth I couldn't say to her face. Not in my heart. She came in earlier than usual, arms full with a small stack of books and a bag that looked far too heavy for one shoulder. I offered to help before I even thought about it, stepping out from behind the counter. "You don't have to," she started, her tone quick, clipped, almost defensive. "I know," I said, reaching for the bag anyway. "But I want to." She paused, eyes narrowing in that way she does when she's measuring whether to let me in or not. Then, finally, she let the strap slip from her shoulder. It was heavier than I expected. She laughed softly, not out of amusement, more like surprise. "You'll ruin your back before you're 30. "I'll take the risk," I answered. The words felt bigger than the moment, though I didn't mean them to. She caught it too, I think, because her smile faded into something more careful. We sat together at the counter afterward while she flipped through the books she'd brought. I watched her fingers trace the margins, the small notations she'd made in pencil. Her nails were short, clean, practical, and yet, the way she touched the page felt almost delicate, as if the paper itself might bruise. "You annotate everything?" I asked. "Not everything," she said without looking up. "Only the ones I think will outlive me." That was the first time I noticed how tired she looked. Not in her posture, not even in her voice, but in her eyes. Like she'd been carrying something unseen for years, and every line of ink in those margins was a piece of it. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. Instead, I just watched as she closed one of the books slowly, her palm resting flat on the cover longer than necessary. At one point, she laughed at something I said. I don't even remember what. The sound was short, surprised, like she wasn't used to laughing in front of me. She immediately covered her mouth, shaking her head as if she'd slipped. Sorry, she murmured, cheeks warming slightly. For laughing? She didn't answer, only lowered her hand and looked away, out the front window where rain had just begun tapping against the glass. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was thick, pulsing. I could hear her breathing, slow, measured, like she was steadying herself from something she didn't want me to see. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than before. You noticed too much, she said. I leaned back, unsure if it was a warning or something closer to a confession. Maybe both. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for her bag. Not intentional, but she didn't move it away immediately, either. Just a second too long. Just enough to make the air feel charged again. And when she finally pulled back, leaving me with the fading echo of her touch, I couldn't shake the thought that she'd left more behind than she meant to. The rain hadn't stopped all evening. By closing time, it was coming down in sheets, hammering the roof hard enough that even the buzzing ceiling fan seemed drowned out. She lingered in the shop longer than usual, flipping through a book she'd already bought weeks ago, like leaving wasn't really an option. You'll get soaked out there, I said, pulling the shutters halfway down. Her glance toward the glass doors was brief. I don't mind the rain. But she didn't move. I grabbed the old kettle from the back and made tea. Nothing special, just the kind of dusty bags we kept in the storeroom for staff. I set a cup in front of her without asking. She looked at it for a second, then at me. You'll spoil me. Doubtful, I said. But the way she let the steam fog her glasses for a moment before slipping them off made something inside me tighten. We sat at the counter, listening to the storm. There was something about the sound, relentless, almost protective, that made the silence between us heavier, more honest. She sipped slowly, her fingers cupped around the mug as though she needed the warmth more than the taste. Then, out of nowhere, her phone buzzed against the wood. She glanced at the screen, and whatever was there made her expression shift. Not dramatically, but enough. The kind of subtle change you only catch if you're watching too closely. Which, of course, I was. She turned the phone face down, forcing a light laugh. People always call when the timing is worst, don't they? I wanted to ask who it was. An ex? A husband? Someone I had no right to think about? But the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded, pretending the tea was suddenly fascinating. The air shifted after that. She leaned back slightly, then forward again, like she couldn't quite find where she wanted to be. At one point, our knees brushed under the counter. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. I told myself it meant nothing. That it was the cramped space. The way the storm outside seemed to push us closer together. But when she tilted her head toward me, not much, just enough that I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, I knew I was lying. She whispered, almost to herself, we shouldn't. And I wanted to say, then why are we here? But I didn't. I just sat there, every muscle locked, afraid that even breathing too loudly would break whatever fragile balance kept us tethered in that moment. The rain thundered harder. She set her mug down, her hand brushing mine again, softer this time, intentional in a way I couldn't dismiss. I looked at her. She looked at me. The distance between us was less than a breath. And then, the phone buzzed again, sharp and insistent, dragging her back. She straightened, pulling her hand away, her expression closing like a door just shut too firmly. I should go, she said, voice steadier than it had any right to be. I nodded, but when she walked toward the door, the storm outside felt easier to face than the storm she'd just left behind in me. The next time she came in, there wasn't rain or laughter or even books between us. Just a kind of quiet that felt sharper than words. She set her bag on the counter and didn't open it. I didn't ask why. I just stood across from her, waiting for her to fill the air like she always did with questions that sounded like riddles. But nothing came. The clock on the wall ticked. The hum of the lights buzzed faintly. Every sound felt louder than her silence. Finally, I said, you're quiet tonight. She looked up at me then, eyes steady, unreadable. And that bothers you? No, I said. Too quickly. Then softer. Maybe. Her gaze didn't move. It pinned me there, made the space between us feel smaller and heavier than it was. She leaned against the counter, her hand grazing the edge as if she needed something solid to hold on to. What are we doing? She asked at last. Her voice wasn't sharp. It wasn't even uncertain. It was heavy, like she already knew the answer and hated herself for asking. I tried to speak, but the words slipped. I don't know. She let out a breath, not a sigh exactly. More like something she'd been carrying for too long finally forcing its way out. This, she gestured faintly between us, the invisible tether we never spoke of. This isn't simple. I nodded. My throat was too tight for anything else. Her eyes softened then, only slightly, like the weight of saying it out loud had stripped away the armor she usually wore. You're young, she whispered. Too young to be tangled up with someone like me. I don't feel young when I'm with you, I said before I could stop myself. The silence that followed pressed harder than any touch. She turned her face away, as if the words themselves were too much. We didn't move for a long time. Just stood there, the quiet between us louder than the storm had been that night. I could feel every unspoken thing circling the air. The things we weren't brave enough to reach for. The things we weren't willing to let go. At one point, she closed her eyes. Just for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something raw in her expression, something unguarded that made my chest ache. This isn't fair to you, she murmured, almost to herself. I wanted to ask what fair had to do with anything, but the words didn't make it out. Instead, I just looked at her, at the woman who kept telling me we were just friends, even as her voice trembled against the truth neither of us could name. And then she gave me the line that wouldn't leave me, the one that left me hollow and burning all at once. If you keep looking at me like that, I won't be able to keep pretending. I stayed late again that night, though there was no reason to. The store was already locked, shelves straightened, receipts boxed away. But she was there, sitting at the counter with her bag at her feet, like she wasn't ready to step back into whatever waited outside. The overhead light flickered once, then steadied. She didn't seem to notice. She was staring at the little leather notebook she carried sometimes, turning it over in her hands without opening it. You're doing that thing again, I said quietly. She blinked, looking up. What thing? Staring at something like it's safer closed than open. A faint smile tugged at her mouth, but it didn't last. She pushed the notebook toward me. Go on. Look. I hesitated. She'd never offered before. The cover was soft from use, the edges worn. Inside, tucked between pages, was a photograph, faded, edges curling. A man, younger than her, but older than me. His arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling. Not posed. It was the kind of smile you don't fake when someone catches you mid-laugh. That was him, she said softly. Her voice was steady, but her fingers tapped against the counter in a rhythm that gave her away. I didn't mean to, I started, but she cut me off. No, it's fine. You should know. She exhaled slowly, as if the air had been caught in her chest for years. He's gone. Years now. Car accident. I don't talk about him. Not because I've forgotten. Because I haven't. The silence that followed felt different this time. Not heavy, fragile. Like if I said the wrong thing, the whole moment would shatter. I didn't tell her she looked sad. I didn't tell her I was sorry. I just kept my eyes on the photograph, tracing the edges with my thumb before sliding it back inside the notebook. You remind me of him, she said then, her voice barely above a whisper. The words landed in me like a spark and a wound at once. Is that why you? I stopped. The question felt too dangerous. She shook her head before I could finish. No, that's why I shouldn't. Her hand hovered near mine on the counter, trembling just slightly. She didn't touch me, didn't move closer, just left the space charged between us, her confession hanging like something that had been waiting too long to escape. When she finally gathered her things and stood, she avoided my eyes. But at the door, she paused, one hand on the frame. Without turning back, she said, Sometimes I wonder if I only see him because I'm afraid of seeing you. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with the photograph's afterimage burned behind my eyes, and the ache of being both too much and never enough in the same breath. I told myself it didn't matter. Told myself she was busy, that people like her had entire worlds beyond these walls. But the hollow quiet of the store without her footsteps made every excuse sound like a lie. When she finally walked in again, she didn't greet me with her usual half-smile or questions. She just set her bag down, slid onto the stool by the counter, and sat there like the weight she carried had finally become too much to hide. I poured tea without asking. She wrapped her hands around the mug but didn't drink. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't sharp this time. It was tired, worn in, like both of us knew there was nothing left to pretend. Finally, she said, "I shouldn't have told you about him." "You needed to," I said softly. Her eyes lifted to mine. "And you? What do you need?" The question pressed into me harder than it should have. My answer wanted to spill out. "You," but I bit it back. My hands curled against the counter. "I need you to stop running from what's already here," I whispered. She closed her eyes, her shoulders tightening, then softening as if she'd been bracing for a blow that never came. "This isn't the life I imagined," she said, voice trembling just enough to hear. "Not with you. Not like this." And yet, she trailed off, but she didn't need to finish. Her hand shifted, just barely grazing mine. This time, neither of us pulled back. Minutes slipped by. The rain outside had returned, gentle this time, pattering against the glass like a rhythm, keeping us steady. She leaned forward, her forehead resting in her palm, exhaustion etched into her. I wanted to reach out, to hold her, but I stayed still until she moved first. Her head tilted, brushing lightly against my shoulder. Not a declaration, not an accident, just gravity. I didn't move, didn't breathe for a moment. Then slowly, carefully, I leaned so my temple touched hers. No words, no grand gesture, just the quiet collapse of two people too tired to fight what was already written between them. Her breath warmed the side of my neck. My hand turned, fingers threading gently through hers on the counter. She let it happen. No hesitation, no withdrawal, only the softest squeeze in return. And that was it. Not fireworks, not a confession, just a decision neither of us needed to say out loud. When she finally whispered, her voice was barely audible, but it carried everything. "We can't go back now." And I knew she was right. The silence that followed wasn't emptiness this time. It was ours. I think about that night more often than I admit. Not because of anything dramatic, not because of words shouted or promises sworn. No, what I remember most is the quiet. The way silence finally stopped being something to fear. She doesn't come to the bookstore as often now. That part of our story has ended. We meet elsewhere, places that don't feel borrowed, places where we don't have to pretend she's just a customer and I'm just a clerk. She still carries her notebook. Sometimes she lets me read the margins, the parts of herself she once kept guarded like a locked door. I don't remind her that I notice things she tries to hide. She knows I do. That's the difference now. She lets herself be seen. And me? I've stopped standing outside her world like it's a window I shouldn't touch. I'm inside it now, with all its weight and imperfection. What changed wasn't sudden. It wasn't even clear the moment it happened. It was gradual, a slow undoing of distance, a surrender to something neither of us planned. She hasn't stopped reminding me of the years between us. I haven't stopped feeling them either. But love doesn't measure itself in calendars. It measures in glances, in silences, in the way her hand finds mine without thought. Sometimes we sit without speaking for hours. That used to terrify me. Now it feels like the purest language we share. Looking back, I realize it was never about denying what we felt. It was about earning it, letting the ache, the restraint, the near misses teach us what it meant to choose someone, fully, without illusion. She taught me that love isn't about rushing toward fireworks. It's about standing still long enough to recognize the ember that never goes out. And maybe I taught her something too, that even after loss, after regret, after telling yourself a story has ended, another can begin. If you've stayed with me through this, maybe you see a piece of your own story in ours, a silence you've lived through, a glance that meant more than you could say. Love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it waits, patient and flawed, until you're ready to hear it. And when it comes, it changes everything. Quietly, Completely. So tell me, have you ever kept something unspoken in your heart, waiting for the right moment to be heard?